Good evening to all of you, and welcome to TimesPro's 89th Leadership Leaders Lecture on a wonderful topic, as all of you must have known by now, on digital transformation from innovation blueprint to operational blueprint. And to do the honors, we have Sateesh Kumar Challa, who is joining us from New York, very early morning there. And let me have the pleasure of introducing him before I hand over the platform to you, Satish. He's currently the head of digital transformation office at the Société Générale, New York, and he's an accomplished technology leadership and management professional with a wealth of experience driving delivery of global digital transformation programs involving model development, data modeling, data governance, data privacy, anti-money laundering, regulatory compliance, IT or technology strategy, software and application delivery, business process management, and IT infrastructure on the cloud. And he, with a proven record of solving complex business issues using technology to enhance speed to market, build scalability, and deliver an improved stakeholder experience, skill resource allocation to achieve all deliverables, develops and deploys robust processes which achieve operational excellence. Leading business and technology change initiatives, results-driven change agent creating a shared vision and leads from the front to build, empower, and motivate multicultural and cross-functional teams to achieve goals and expectations. That, in a sense, is about 20 years illustrious career. And those of you who happen to see it, and I would really urge to have a look at his very illustrious after having done his education in India. He started his career with the city where he worked for 13 years and 11 months, right? And the last one being vice president between February 2013 and June 2018. And after that, he worked with another great bank and a global bank, Jewish Bank, as vice president between June 2018 and December 2020. After that, again, he worked with another financial powerhouse called as MUFG as a director, regional head of data insights and analytics Americas between December 2020 and April 2022. And since April 2022, he has been the head of digital transformation office at the current company, that's Société Générale in New York. And like I said, if you look at his resume, all that he has done over the years, I think, in fact, some of them must have been ahead of the curve, really ahead of the time as well. And he comes with this great experience of having led these digital transformation initiatives from the front, right? And right from ideation to execution, you name it, I think he has been, seen it all. So we can't, I don't think we could have asked anything for anyone better from the point of view of taking us to this wonderful idea of innovation blueprint to operational blueprint, right? I think those of you, especially who are in the middle or who are aspiring to lead such initiatives, I think you will have great actionable insights. It's almost like an actionable project, action learning project kind of thing, this brief session. So I'm sure you're going to have it at the end of this brief session. And once again, welcome, Satish, and absolutely pleasure having you. And sorry to disturb you early in the morning on Saturday. And it's an absolute pleasure having Satish. Over to you, Satish.
Yep, thanks so much, Nagendra. And this is a great introduction, but I think we have much more exciting topic today to cover. So hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you have joined. Today, we will try to go through the journey of digital transformation. Let me start sharing my screen. Come on, quick second. Yeah. Are you able to see my screen yet?
I think it's loading. Not yet, Satish, not yet.
I think it should be now. Slowly, it's
done. Yep, it's up and running.
Perfect. So let's proceed with this topic, right? And we have a lot of interesting segues within this session today. As you all can see, this is a journey, again, digital transformation. What we will cover in the next 40 minutes is primarily we will understand what does digital transformation mean to begin with, because it means several things to several people. So I want to actually contextualize that piece, and then we go into the future. How does the banking sector look with the advanced technologies in place, and how can we build that kind of bank using artificial intelligence, data infrastructure around it? And with that future in vision, we will try to understand currently what are the use cases which are currently at play in the industry in terms of data and artificial intelligence. So when I'm using artificial intelligence, I'm already assuming that data is part of the package. So I may refrain from using data and AI in general throughout the session. It could be mostly AI, so you have to infer that it's mostly coming with the data infrastructure, right? And then by the time we detail all of those use cases, we would have understood even what are the levers or the factors which are really contributing to the digital transformation. How do we benchmark these solutions, and how do we make it sustainable? I think that's the uh, roadmap which we will have, and that's the agenda topics for today, which we will cover. So with that, let's proceed to the context. What is digital transformation? As I said, every company has its own way of looking at it, and there's no standardized definition. But to give you more context to it, I see it as 5 different pillars. And the way I see it is, it all starts with innovation pillar, where you really see the feasibility of these use cases. You take up any use case and you try to understand if that is really useful. Is it fit for purpose for your organization ecosystem, and is it solving the big picture, right? And this is where you are trying to improve and adopt newer technologies to see which are more nimble and efficiently integrate into your user journeys, your ecosystems. That is where you call, and that is how I put it under the pillar called innovation. Then we move on to automation. This is where you see the traditional software development being packaged, and then you have the latest low code, no code environments, all the end user computing tools which solve a specific use case within the business world, then the application programming interfaces that really bridge the gaps between the business processes. Uh, Essentially, automation is a place where you are trying to integrate all of the organization silos and bringing in more efficiency. So from innovation to automation, the theme really continues in terms of improving these process efficiencies. That's where you get into an interesting landscape of modeling. Modeling is a traditional place primarily used from a statistical background, but with the advent of big data and machine learning, it has tremendously transformed. You now see opportunities to automate business decisions. You embed these models strategically in places where you could really enhance your existing workflows and processes. So thereby, again, gain. So I think I'll try to plug in even this example. When we go to the relevant slide, I'll let you know what this is in terms of the context. Anyway, so getting back to our topic of data and analytics pillar, here you have data pillar and analytics. I'm clubbing both of those. Primarily, you are trying to look at all of the data which is being produced within the organization, the home for it, whether it has to be resided in a cloud, and how does the cloud be? Is it hybrid? Is it private? So on and so forth. I mean, you answer all those questions in the migration of the data, the location part of it. But then essentially, when you get these into the infrastructure, what do you want to do? You want to do a lot of analysis, especially if you are a retail bank. You may want to really have feedback mechanisms, the channels plugged in to get the data into the organization so that you can perform real-time analysis. Further, you would also want to see your feedback on your products which have been recently launched. So again, a lot of analysis of these data. So there is raw data which is happening within the organization based on your processes. There's additional data which is coming as a feedback on the launches or the interactions with the external world. So that is also part of the data which the organization should be benefited. So assuming that you have taken care of all of this, of course, you have to also have governance on around data so that you can have constant feedback in terms of what's the state of your data's health check, right? And in the landscape of your data. With this infrastructure in place, you move into the analytics space, and you try to understand what is happening within the organization around that, and that's what you bucket under descriptive analytics. And when you try to mature further to understand, based on your historical activity, can I predict something in future? And that's what is predictive analytics. Again, this predictive analytics would interact with modeling. Primarily, predictive analytics comes with a lot of models in place, and then if you really want to advance this further, the data itself will be able to tell you what you could remediate based off all what is happening and what it could predict confidently, and thereby remediating on an autopilot mode. And that is what is the prescriptive analytics. So this is the entire pillar where I group them into data and analytics. And to cover all of these, and as you can see, innovation, automation, modeling, data and analytics mostly are open-ended, being the nature. All of them more exploratory, because you have to really do a lot of feasibility. Then you still don't know whether you will be able to succeed based off your data feasibility, so on. And to get more discipline around it, you need to have project management in place to just ensure that you get these initiatives delivered within the specified timeline, scope, and budget. So this is the context I wanted to paint you all around digital transformation. And again, this is a context from a financial institution, the banking landscape. If you are a product company, there could be some components heavily targeted for cloud, and also on the social media side of things. So those would be additional pillars you may be focusing on. But being a bank, I would highly categorize these components under these 5 pillars. So with this understanding, let's move on to the future. Let's see, how does the bank of the future with AI embedded in it look like, right? So towards the right, you will see an interesting diagram, which is an extract from the McKinsey's report. So you can see there are 4 swim lanes. I would like to just unpack this. You don't need to go through every block in this diagram. This is loaded with a lot of information, and we could spend the whole day on this picture itself, right? But just to summarize this at a high level, you just want to see the bottom-up approach. The lowest swim lane out there with the operating model is essentially speaking volumes about building the culture, how you want to operate your whole organization in terms of the methodologies of working, of delivery, your communication, your retention of talent, and mobilizing the talent accordingly, right? So this is about the cultural standards or the operating model of the organization. The next swim lane above is the core technology and data infrastructure. So this is where the traditional technology, when I say traditional technology, the legacy technologies which is available currently in the bank, is it fit for purpose, or should we upgrade it to align it to our objectives of advanced technologies like cyber? If you want to really have a good infrastructure for effective APIs ecosystem, I think you have to have that architecture. So you need to take the help of technology to get that architecture aligned to the data part of it. And then if you're building AI capabilities within the bank, you need to have data infrastructure supporting to it. You can't be efficient without that kind of infrastructure. So you could have targeted architectures and infrastructure, basically trying to target those respective use cases, thereby moving into the capabilities swim lane, which is essentially artificial intelligence, where you have, again, a drill down of artificial intelligence and advanced analytics as a combination. But if you see the artificial intelligence layer, it is now, each of them is a use case in itself, like the behavioral analytics. You want to have behavioral analytics on various grounds. It could be on customer onboarding process, on their activities, and then it could be even based off your credit card payments activity, whether they are fraud, which is happening, and is the nature of the client in line with your expected behavior. So that is one behavioral analytics. You could automate several things using robotics, process automation out there in the robotics place that can align and work in tandem with your machine learning models to make it even more seamless, right? So blockchain and then voice script analysis on the customer interfacing applications. You could just go into this heavy transformation happening on the customer interaction. And you could see it yourself on credit card, uh, customer line or customer care. You see there's a lot of automation happening. Earlier it was automated more by rule based, but now it's more driven by machine learning. And now you have even natural language processing capabilities. So these all capabilities will help us gain advanced insights, right? And you will be able to really make decisions in terms of for your client, can you lend credit, right? And or you are trying to monitor all the activity happening within the bank on real-time basis. You are able to even retain customers, or you could offer cross-selling of products based of their activity and on the context you have persisted in your ecosystem. By doing this advanced analytics, you are trying to gain additional knowledge that you could pass on for better marketing and sales pipeline, thereby improving engagement for the customers, right? And that's the highest swim lane, or the first swim lane which you are seeing on the picture. This is where you are able to curate your existing products to really align to the market sentiment, experiences of the customers, and you are able to even channel the resources on areas which will bring you maximum impact. So why do you do all of this, and what's the whole goal? I think that is where you see the pyramid really culminating to the top on four major factors. One, we definitely want better profitability, and the end goal is not just profitability, but we are focusing on customers to personalize at scale. So when you see about the personalization, this is more context based. It is um, not unlike what we used to happen 10 years ago or 20 years ago, where you you bought something and there could be another supplemental product based of historical facts you're trying to sign. It is not that. It is based of real-time interaction. You know the latest sentiment and you have contextualized that information and you will provide that. So then with that, how do you get to that personalization? It could be even with the omni-channel experience. So your customers, you're trying to bring in stickiness of customers in terms of their activity with the brand, their interactions with your ecosystem. You're bringing standardized experience. So I'll give you a simple example. While just logging into this session in Zoom, I had a problem to have this background, right? I mean, whatever background you're currently seeing on the screen. And it's interesting that this background is allowed only on the browser version of Zoom rather than on the client version of Zoom. So that is not omni-channel experience, right? Primarily, I know, and again, Zoom is huge, but then still there is a chance for improvement. So all I'm saying is omni-channel experience is very important for you, for any given organization to maintain seamless integration to your ecosystem and not let customers be drifted to other third-party vendors, right? So you have to really make that experience standard across all the channels which you have offered. And this helps us to really improve time to market. So that's the goal, primarily to improve profitability, personalization, scale, and having standardized experiences and time to market. So how do we summarize this, and what would be the major takeaways for us to get to the future? I would say we need to know the why. We need to have the purpose, focus on the why, and the why will drive us to get to the forward strategy, right? And this will help uh, us to move from the current state to the future state. And the future state would be more tightly integrated. And how do we break those silos in the business processes? Is by taking the aid of technology, data, and artificial intelligence. All of those advanced technologies that could help us have this ecosystem more tightly coupled with a good feedback loop mechanism, right? And to have this in a nice package and an ecosystem, you need to essentially have a bedrock of foundation on the operational and cultural standards. That is very important, with the goal of mapping all of these user journeys within the ecosystem and outside the ecosystem, so that they are integrated. Thereby, your customer experience and engagement is heightened, right? So that is the AI bank of the future. So with this future, let's come to the present, right? And let's come back to the present to discuss some of the use cases which are at play in the industry. And again, within the banking space, there are a lot of use cases. I'm picking a specific area so that can get a more holistic overview of the financial crimes compliance space. So within the banking domain, you essentially have compliance and risk as one of the major areas that needs to help banking supervision uh, happen successfully, right? And this is the area which I would like to focus. And just to give some data around why financial crimes compliance. So of the various risks which are out there, and at a broad categorization, it would be around 12 risks. But per the OCC's definition of risks for banking supervision, there are 9 risks, and compliance risk is one of those risks. And within this compliance risk, you have financial crimes as a subdomain. And I would like to give a brief refresher for people who don't have that backdrop, and just so that you are aware of what it is before I go into the use cases, so that you can really connect those dots. Here you can see the financial crime risk taxonomies at a high level. There are 4 different risk taxonomies, starting with know your customer, right? Know your customer, I think everyone should have experienced this. If you have opened an account with any financial institution, you are asked several questions. And this is a huge pillar of risk taxonomy where customer identification is taken into account. You are diligently asked for several probing questions to understand your expected activity. And this helps us understand, assess the risk while onboarding customers. And there are several processes which happen after you onboard the customers. So we are not going more into it, but just giving you an idea, this risk taxonomy is primarily understanding all about the customer activity and their profile. So moving to the second risk taxonomy is the sanctions space. So sanctions space is more of restrictions enforced by governments, right? And it could be restrictions on countries, it could be restrictions on entities, it could be restrictions on individuals. Essentially, the bank is trying to use this sanctions program to comply with the sanctions regulation and prevent any bad actors using its infrastructure for activity, right? So that is the essence of sanctions risk taxonomy. Moving to anti-money laundering, this could be much more seen or felt in general to understand where this origination of your funds are, and if those or the source of funds are illegal. The whole premise of this risk taxonomy is to prevent the laundering of the money for activities like terrorism, human trafficking. So it is highly uh, critical for a bank to identify this activity and report to the regulatory bodies, which are using this information to get in touch with the agencies that will help find the nexus of criminal activity. So moving to the final pillar out there in the risk factors of financial crimes is anti-bribery and corruption. This is a space where you are trying to identify unethical conduct within the organization and your organization's interaction with the external vendors. So this pillar on bribery and corruption, anti-bribery and corruption, actually helps compliance with the anti-bribery and corruption laws. In addition to it, it also brings in transparency of conduct, right? So these are the 4 risk taxonomies under financial crimes. Having said that, let's move on to the use cases. What are the use cases at play for each of these risk taxonomies? Starting with know your customer, right? In here, as you can see, there are a lot of questions which are being asked for a customer when they are being onboarded. This onboarding of customers in one jurisdiction could be, highly aligned to the local regulations, the local processes of that particular region. So to give more tangible example, again, I'm saying a customer onboarded in USA would have a different set of questions than a customer onboarded in Africa or a customer onboarded in Asia, for that matter. Now, if you're a global bank, the problem compounds further, and you have all of this information originating from processes which are not standardized, and you need to make a sense of this. And there is huge data around it, and when you have millions of customers, it becomes interesting for big data and machine learning at play. Here, you could really try to use this information for profiling the customers and understanding where the risk clusters are. So customer profiling is a great use case in the KYC space. Then getting into the network analysis, it's not enough for us to understand just the customers. You need to also understand how they are interacting, because your ecosystem will be protected only if you have vigilant monitoring in place and you are trying to understand the customer's interaction with other customers or other third parties. The reason being, you want to also have robust mechanisms of prevention of risk penetrating into your ecosystem. So this network analysis is, again, a prime example where you could deploy machine learning to identify the network activity, gain meaningful insights, and assess your customers' exposure risk, right? And then you could relay that information accordingly internally to other risk stripes and also to your marketing and sales pipeline. Going to the third block on this slide, it is a due diligence recommendation. So once you have onboarded your customer, it's great that you have profiled them. It's great that you are now understanding where they are interacting, but the information is not sufficient. I mean, you can't vet a customer once and leave it there forever. Due diligence is an ongoing thing, but it's a costly affair in terms of resources which are unlimited. Which are limited in place. So how do you efficiently get the due diligence done, not on a periodic basis, but on a basis which is more real time, based of risk profiling of those customers and having the signals right. So you could have machine learning models in place evaluating several features out there on customer data, and it triggers based on the risk based approach, and it triggers the highest risk set of customers so that you could expedite your due diligence recommendation immediately, so that you can perform those due diligences on those customers on a prioritized mechanism, right? And going to the fourth use case here on KYC, you have quality control of customer records. This is where the information flow, which is happening in all directions on the onboarding of customers or during your due diligence, during your other processes within KYC, it contaminates the ecosystem. So you need to really identify to stay on top of the record on each of these records to maintain the sanity of information. So to get to this quality control, traditionally you have either manual mechanisms or rule-based mechanisms, but those are not enough for us to really be on top of it. So for that, you need to use NLP and machine learning in combination to get more sense of the quality and raise those exceptions immediately when they occur. Right? These are the four use cases which I see under KYC, which are at play and heavily used in the industry. Then getting into the next taxonomy, that's the sanctions. As you can see earlier, and we discussed that this is a restriction-based ecosystem. You have various filters, parameters which actually screen the entities, the transaction activity which is happening, or even the processes or interactions with countries which are sanctioned. So these filters are configured on specific thresholds, but these need to be optimized on a constant basis so that it doesn't result in a lot of false positives. how do we get to that optimization? Traditionally, again, you have done this basically on the statistical based approach. Now you take it further in tandem with statistical approach by deploying machine learning so that you can get real-time computation of these filters, how they are performing based on the activity, and you can calibrate those filters at optimum level, thereby reducing false positives. So that's a filter optimization. Then you get into the layer of alerts which have been generated out of the sanctions engine, and you see the scoring mechanism uh, to be helping the analyst in terms of performing that investigations. So you can, instead of giving plain alerts to the analysts, you are trying to risk rank them based of various criteria and features of the activity upstream. Thereby, the scoring model becomes an improvement in terms of operational productivity. It helps in improving the operations by reducing time for performing the investigations. And if the activity is very low risk, you don't need to manage operations, right? And that's where you get into the auto closures mode. That's the third use case. But you have to be confident on those features. So you will have robust ongoing monitoring on the machine learning models at play, and you can achieve auto closures on that with no human in the loop. There are interesting segment within the whole activity, which could be identical in nature, which could happen in patterns, and it doesn't need to go through the infrastructure at the same rate. And that is the historical activity mesh. So you do have the fourth use case really targeted for that. It could be a simple NLP model which could identify all of the historical activity, match those entities, and try to say that this alert has been investigated and dispositioned in the last 3 months, 6 months, or based on the procedural compatibility. You could have that deployed and relay this into your autoclosures module. So again, at the sanctions level, these are the four main areas where you could use machine learning. Now, moving to anti-money laundering space, there could be some overlap between sanctions and anti-money laundering, again, based off their payment activity, but then I will highlight that when we get to those use cases. But it starts with anomaly detections, right? I mean, the first use case which I see here, which is very important from anti-money laundering space perspective, where sanctions was real time, where you are rejecting the transaction based off your restrictions. If it is met the criteria, you are rejecting the transaction. But in anti-money laundering, it is actually post-payment activity. You're trying to identify the activity of the entity. Has it been performed based off your existing baseline? So in a way, you are trying to see the deviations, right? And deviations of your normalized activity against your existing activity. And any such deviations which have been identified in terms of volume, in terms of value, in terms of their network interactivity, all of that would come under anomaly detection. Again, this is a prime ground for machine learning. Moving to the segmentation aspect. Segmentation is almost like profiling, which you have seen in the KYC space, but here the segmentation is very important in terms of anti-money laundering. If you have 1 million transactions and there are 200,000 entities, you may want to understand how these entities are segmented. The reason being, you would want to identify the risk thresholds for each of these segments. Now, it becomes even more interesting when you are dealing with correspondent banking. So if you are in a retail bank and your exposure is limited, if your perimeter is within one jurisdiction, I think it is fine. But it becomes very important when you are in a correspondent banking setup, where the bank is an intermediary for the flow through of funds, and the bank has an obligation to monitor these transactions, and they have to identify the risky transactions which can't be passed through their infrastructure. So that's why, again, segmentation is important. And again, rule-based engines generally have segmentation using statistical models, but that's not sufficient. So to give much more tangible example, your activity of your segmentation is more static when you have segments in place and you leave it there. It gets periodically upgraded. That's fine, but is that good enough? I don't think so. The reason being, if you have a segment defined for a prior year activity, and there's been a black swan event like COVID, where the payment activity has dramatically reduced or skyrocketed, or you have a Russia-Ukraine war kind of situation. Suddenly, you have payment activity flowing through very differently. Your segments are no longer the same, right? And how do you tackle that kind of situation? You need to have dynamic segmentation, and again, the computational capabilities which are currently offered, we should utilize that, and we need to have dynamic segmentation so that those overrides can be performed and you can capture the risky activity optimally, right? So that's segmentation. Moving to the third block of use case, that's the red flags detection. Here, there is a huge register of AML red flags. These are based off traditional research in terms of feedback loop mechanisms coming out of investigations. However, you want to have technology at play because the risk, whatever was happening a decade ago, is no longer the same. You have risk landscape shifting on a day-to-day basis. So you need to use technology of artificial intelligence to see the raw transactions, identify newer red flags, or have a recommendation of those abnormal activity within the transactions. So that's the red flag detection. It's a recommendation algorithm which you would be using within machine learning. Going to the thresholds. So as I have stated, within the AML world, you generally have rule-based engines, and similar to sanctions, where filters are helping you to let through the payment activity. Here you have thresholds helping the existing payment activity to meet the criteria and then generate an alert. But how do we get the optimal thresholds? I think that's another thing. As I stated, in case of segmentation, you need to have thresholds computed on a real-time basis based on the latest and greatest payment activity, and accordingly compute that. And that's the threshold recommendation, which will help you have the threshold set at an optimal level so that you are never losing the material activity below the line, right? And so that's threshold recommendation. So going to the fifth use case of historical activity match. This is again the same as what I've stated in the sanctions world: historical activity match and false positive reduction. So historical activity match, in case of anti-money laundering, if the entities are interacting, the same entities have interacted in the past 3 months, and an analyst has already looked at it and they have closed it in the past, there's no reason why it cannot be closed now. Well, there's a condition supplied there. You need to also recheck before you make that kind of decision to see if anything has changed on that particular entity, has a risk moved for that entity. But all of those mechanisms can be automated, and you can combine that with the NLP model to get historical activity match, reduce those kind of alerts for investigations to perform further investigation. So moving to the false positive reduction, this is where you can see the great improvement in terms of operational productivity. Primarily in the anti-money laundering world across, you can see that the rule-based engines produce at least 90% plus false positives. So it's very low practice space. And when you see to the number of alerts to the number of SARs, the suspicious activity that is filed with the regulators, it's abysmally low. So it's hardly 1 to 2% out of the overall volume of alerts which get generated. So there's a huge opportunity here for machine learning to really reduce the false positives, and that is the space which can be, you can go both the supervised and even unsupervised if you are really confident of the population. So those are the use cases under anti-money laundering. Coming to the last risk taxonomy on the financial crime side, you have the first one is anomaly detection under anti-bribery and corruption. Here, the anomaly detection is slightly different than what you have seen in the anti-money laundering space. Here, you're trying to see what kind of interactions are happening within the organizational perimeter. how employees are conducting any of the payments activity, how employees within the bank are interacting with your external vendors. Are those vendors having any exposure? So exposure to specific industries which are highly risky, and is that norm? Is that normal? Right. So these kind of things have to be analyzed, and again, machine learning can be used for the wide varieties of features to get the anomalies identified. Going to the second use case, you have the segmentation space. Here, you're not segmenting, unlike anti-money laundering, the entities. You are segmenting the vendors, all the touch points of the organization with the external world, and categorizing them in the different zones. So, to give an example, let's say a vendor actually deals with weapons industry. It is high risk. Or a vendor actually deals with construction. It's a high cash flow business. So there's a high chances of corruption there, right? So those segments have to be identified. So you need to see how you segment your customers, because you want to understand those interactions with the vendors, your exposure of bribery, and also the reputational risk at play. So this segmentation using machine learning will help you identify that. The red flags detection, again, from a bribery perspective, is also based off your transactional activity. Again, a simple example could be like entertaining clients, right? I mean, when the company personnel actually take out clients for entertainment, what is their usual spend? Is it normal? And is that really in line with the company policies? Or is that breaking the code of conduct in terms of the bribery laws which have been stipulated? So these have to be identified. You need to be on top of those red flags. And again, as I say, these have to be funneled using the data pipelines to get these red flags identified. So that concludes the high-level use cases for the 4 major risk taxonomies under financial crimes compliance space. But then there are several transversal topics. These topics are going to be the constant theme across these risk stripes. What you can see is all of these have huge amounts of data, and for global banks, this becomes a huge challenge. But then these themes will help you identify. The transversal topics is data mapping. So there are several sources coming into any of these risk taxonomies to function as a program. And the mapping of data is very important. You need to prove for your internal systems and also for your internal controls that you are monitoring and on top of all data which is supposed to be going to that particular program. So to give you a simple example, anti-money laundering as an example, if there are 1 million transactions which are happening across the bank in a given month, there should be a traceability of those transactions, and you need to be able to prove that these 1 million transactions have resulted into 4,000 suspicious alerts. And the path for getting to from million transactions to 4,000 alerts, you need to be able to prove through logs mechanism or mechanism of handshake or checks in place, which helps you understand that all of these data elements are properly mapped. So this is more of an automation with data, and also try to identify anomalies using machine learning. You could have clustering in place. You could be able to reduce the dimensionality of the data, but you have that opportunities in the data mapping space. Moving to the data quality, I think this is a common topic, not just here, but for all other areas within the bank. The quality of data is important for all of these programs to be robust and healthy. And within the quality landscape, we need to take it further using machine learning in terms of identifying the data drifts. As I was stating, we need to have analytics on that models to bring in prescriptive mechanisms of correction so that you could really integrate that back into the model so that those models are relevant and are able to make the decisions more efficiently. So data quality landscape can be on the bare minimum at attribute level in terms of the flow of those attributes into the systems, whereby you're trying to cluster them based on their anomalies of conformity and the dimensions of quality in terms of completeness, accuracy, so on and so forth. But if you take it further, not just onto the dimensions of quality, you're trying to also play at those attributes which are really critical for the decisional capabilities of these processes, these models which you have deployed. So the data drift measures and having ongoing monitoring of data quality is a transversal topic and use case, right? So with that, as we have seen several use cases within the financial crimes space, let's move on to the factors which are contributing to digital transformation. And I see that by discussing these use cases, you have understood the major factor obviously is a top-down approach where the leadership is completely committed and confident to stand back in terms of this strategy. They have to come up with a strategy which is forward-looking so that they can really rally all of these employees and build an organization around customer at the center, and data around these strategies. So in a way, you have all of these processes really weaved around data and customer, and then without losing the essence of these transformation, you need to have robust mechanisms of security and compliance. Otherwise, these things will just fall apart. And how do we ensure that this really happen in a right way? You need to be able to benchmark them effectively and ensure that they happen on an ongoing basis and it's sustainable for the organization so that they can reap the benefits on a continuum basis. So those are the high-level factors which really contribute to the digital transformation. And if you go further, we want to do a little drill down on the benchmarking and sustainability. So how do we benchmark? And again, when you see the benchmarking aspect, you can identify when you go into the innovation pillar, which I have stated in the first slide, we benchmark based on the use cases which come in the innovation pillar. You try to understand what's the success criteria, how does it look like, and what is your expectation of that use case to play it, right? And based on the success criteria, you try to define the key performing indicators, the KPIs, for that specific use case. Now, if you're happy with these key performing indicators, or you have met those indicators after a couple of iterations, is that it? No. You have to also identify where you are within the market, right? You have to benchmark yourself with the peers and see what your industry standards in general. So that will help ensure close the loop in terms of your processes, your models in place, and your infrastructure, which is supporting the digital transformation so that you are relevant in the marketplace. And how do we ensure that it is happening in a sustainable way? You get to a simple way of identifying your strategy. You have the forward-looking map. Is that map still relevant? Are there opportunities for us to tweak that map? How do we get to periodically challenge that, tweak it, and have that stay relevant, right? That's the periodic way of reviewing that strategy. And how do we improve the feedback loop? So all of these processes are working, these KPIs are awesome, and you are industrially benchmarked. Is that it? No, you have to also see these are trying to get enriched on a constant basis so that it doesn't drift away from your current performance. So you need to have robust channels of feedback loop mechanisms plugged in back to those processes. So that's the feedback loop which will help you with the sustainability. And then the last one from a sustainability standpoint is your process. All of these processes which are intertwined, you need to really mine those processes to identify the bottlenecks, the opportunities for improvement, the deadlock situations, and try to modify those processes so that it becomes more efficient. So these high-level blocks will help us achieve sustainable digital transformation. So with that, I think I'm almost at the end of the presentation. I would like to thank everyone for staying focused so far, and I leave the floor to Q&A. Over to you, Nagendra.
Thank you so much, Sateesh. I think that's a very big canvas, and we have some questions. Maybe depending on the time, I think maybe we'll take up maybe one or two questions if that's okay with you, Satish.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah. So this is a question from Maithili Dokpati, and her question is, how do you monitor the performance or degradation of AI or ML models for these use cases, and how is the resultant risk mitigated? Thank you, Maithili.
Sure. So I didn't get the second portion of the how. How do you monitor? I got the second part of it. How
The
is?
second one is, how is the resultant risk mitigated?
I see. Okay, got it. So primarily, the models which are out there in artificial intelligence based off your risk register, right? And so it is heavily aligned to the regulation. So let me give you from a US standpoint. In US, every model has to go through SR 11.7 regulation. Primarily, it's heavily regulated where the models need to prove themselves or evidence themselves about the inputs coming into the model and how they are used within the model and how the outputs are generated. And to prove this, you need to have transparencies of data lineage, right? And you measure based off your data drift of critical data elements which are contributing to the decision capabilities of the models. And you have metrics based off your materiality. It could be based off your false negative rate. It could be based off your data drift. You could define based off the overall volumes, the ranges within which the models can operate. Long story short, to simplify it, when the model has been built, you should know as model developer the limitations of the model because you are feeding intelligence into the model. And if you're not confident, I think that model shouldn't be generally promoted. So in a way, a simpler model which is more stable is much better than an advanced algorithm with sophisticated model which you can't explain.
Thank you.
Hope that explains.
Hopefully, Michael, if you have still, I hope you have your answer. And in case if you still have any further question, please do put it in the chat or in the Q&A box. Now, I have another question, but at a very strategic level, Satish, not at an operational level. I think what we get to see is, you get to see right now, fintech that's very popular in India. Now we also see techfin, people like, the companies like Google, Amazons of the world, Walmarts of the world, and maybe WhatsApp of the world. They're also getting into the finance, maybe not the entire banking spectrum, but the payment spectrum at least, right? Now, and then you have a traditional banks like in India. I think with all the consolidation that has happened in the last few years, now all the public sector banks. Now you see the three segments, right? So therefore, you have somebody who's absolutely tech platform, and then getting into the financial services, maybe some part of the value chain, not the entire thing. And then you have these fintech firms, like for example in India, what we get to see is peer-to-peer learning, right? It's a very very famous and it's doing very well. And then you have the traditional banks that you have. So the question is that, do you think the traditional banks may not have that kind of the technology advantage vis-a-vis the other two players? Or in other words, if you put it the other way, do you think the tech platform players, pure tech players, will they have that kind of advantage over the traditional banks in terms of the technology? Because right now, as we get to see, the technology seems to be in the front end, and the operations have become the the back end kind of thing. So, from a strategic perspective, especially from a point of view in a country like India, where you get to see all of them converging very slowly, I think, do you see that trend happening?
No, definitely. And I think that's a great question, actually, Nagendra. So I definitely agree that, the landscape has shifted, I would say, in the past several years from the fintech space, which is trying to start off as a revolution to really overtake the traditional banking. But I think that's not happening really. I would say otherwise we would have seen several banks really collapsed or something like that, at least with that wave. But the thing is, they bring very good niche skill set, as you rightly mentioned, the tech portion, which is quite cutting edge, a different ecosystem, complete banking channels have been lost. You are just only an online bank. All of that kind of new concepts to the table. So I think over a period of time, banks also have realized that there is a good chunk of their business which is being eaten away by these fintechs. Now they are not just now; it's been already an evolution where banks have tried to start collaborating with these fintechs. It's more of a partnership now rather than a threat, because now they realize that you can together win more than what it used to be earlier. So I think that partnership is the way to go, the collaboration, because one is more heavily focused on the tech aspect in terms of bringing great experiences, all that we have discussed in the future bank of the AI portion, right? Targeted use cases, right? But now, interestingly, as a bank, you have a heavy regulations landscape. So again, on the regulations landscape, these fintechs may not be really focused on it. So that's where it started lagging, because they were amazing in terms of technology, but they didn't really have compliance mindset in general. And that's where you have a huge breed of segment of reg techs, which are few, it is still technology with regulatory focus. So in a way, now it's fintech, reg tech in collaboration with banking. That's what is really pushing the way forward.
Very good. Absolutely. Amazing stuff. I have a last question. Maybe I think we already short the time, but with your permission, can I ask one
Sure.
question? Yeah. So I think one other thing that we get to see is that I think I think the early stage of everything in some way or other, Satish, you can correct me, is that when the Safari.com along with the Vodafone have launched the M-Pesa in Kenya, right? It is in some way or other, it has become talk of the town, and the rest of the world started to emulate, especially developing world, where you want to empower the unbanked in the last mile part of it. That's what it is. Like everything you
Mhm.
have mobile phone. That's I think that's one sense in the financial service sector, that the digital transformation. But what you also get to see is that when the banks, right, when the bank, because they have investment, they have a huge I think a mandate, and also they have backed by sufficient investments. While they're investing sufficiently or maybe heavily in or aggressively, if I may say, so in the form of a digital transformation, would it also not presuppose the kind of the preparedness that you should have in the digital ecosystem, the ecosystem? For example, let's say in right country like India. Now, let's say the banks are getting very aggressive as far as the digital transformation is concerned. But does it also not presuppose that you will have what do you call you would expect some sort of digital infrastructure from the ecosystem that is made, the customers, maybe the other players, maybe telecom players, right? Maybe when so how does it happen? Because while you might be going too far, maybe if the rest of the ecosystem is left too behind, how do you bridge that gap? Or do you think at the strategy level, or at in the blueprint level itself, you actually take into account this possible gap analysis?
Again, I think again this is a great topic that we are discussing on it. But the thing is, you're right that the ecosystem of moving customers into the same ecosystem, or having this activity completely transformed. Like for example, why should it take money to move from one point to another point, though the banks know and they have the same customer, and it takes 2 days or 3 days? I
Mm,
think those kind of problems have been solved again by, I think, a amazing way of solving that was the UPI infrastructure, right? I
mm,
mean, so
absolutely.
again, I see that there is innovation happening dramatically, which is changing the landscape of the traditional way of moving funds. But then you are actually moving away from the original concepts, right? You are shifting the concepts of money as a collateral, and you're trying to use your identity, digital profiling of those, and making it secure and accessible to the masses. That is the way you have to go. But maybe this cannot be possible in every shift and lane. Like now we have a new project from Elon Musk, which was just declared just a couple of days ago, where he sees that it would transform the way banks would perform and operate the next year. So again, so in a way, there are ideas which are fundamentally shifting, which could come out, but then the traditional banking has moved primarily at a snail pace, I would definitely say, because they are really hindered by the regulations. Now, even transaction plus 1 day, T plus one is a huge movement which is happening. we would have a one-day transfer probably in next year, and that is now an official thing which we are working upon, which has been there for more than a decade.
No,
But it
absolutely.
involves us, and I think the players are coming in, as you rightly mentioned, like Apple collaborating with Goldman Sachs and then burning their fingers. So these kind of experimentation is happening with investment banks and also product companies. Yeah.
No, I think, I mean, absolutely. I think because I think right there in the US, I think what we got to hear is when the Silicon Valley Bank getting bust, or even Credit Suisse going, I mean, almost like bust, and then it had to be taken over. And these are all unprecedented things that have happened in the banking sector. But I think what you get to see also is in terms of the aggressive the digital push, which I'm sure should stabilize the whole thing. But thank you so
Yes.
much, and Satish, for sparing your time, especially on Saturday morning, and that was a wonderful topic. And great thing is that the kind of use cases that you have shared with all of us, it's been amazing. But I'm sure each one has the enough depth, like you rightly said, to go even more. But for want of time, I think what you shared is definitely the blueprint in one sense. But thank you from all of us, from all of our participants. In despite the cricket fever in India, I think that they have taken time to attend, and that's in one sense the kind of interest that all of our participants have. And look forward to
Yeah.
hosting you once again with maybe another interesting topic in this space, because this space is continuously evolving
Yeah.
at this time.
No, definitely. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Satish.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.